I think one of the biggest missed areas of knowledge in terms of programming books and just resources in general is about legitimate practical debugging of systems. And debugging is sure it's talked about, but I just don't know if we ever get training on it. And if we ever get legitimate resources to show us what to look for, how to do it, and how to take advantage of some of the IDE's very powerful features to allow you to identify potential memory leaks, or just honestly just step through code, put breakpoints. And I've probably read 40 or 50 programming books over the past 3 or 4 years. I don't remember how many times I ever see anything be brought up about debugging or literally just putting breakpoints in your system, how to attach to a process to debug your application. And it's crazy to me. I think that there needs to really, unless I just have missed it, which is possible. I've read a lot of books, but maybe I just haven't explicitly read something on debugging. But I think that if we were able to make a book about practical, we could call it, like, I don't even know, what are we going to call it? Practical debugging of systems in software engineering, where we go through step by step how to set breakpoints, what to look for as you're stepping through code, how to look at a call stack, how to use the watch menu, and how to use local variables, how to attach to processes, how to debug .NET, React, how to debug with Docker containers. There's just so many things that you could talk about, but I think it's a whole section of knowledge that I think has just been missed because, up to a certain point, it's like, yeah, you can learn how to make an application and how to host it and how to run it locally, and you can do all those things. But what happens when the inevitable bug comes around? And what happens when you actually have to diagnose an issue in your system? What happens if you get an error that you don't recognize? What happens if you get some kind of race condition? What happens if you get an error because you have, I don't know, like you don't have the right connection string or whatever it is? I think that is a broad topic of information that has been missed. And I think that if we honestly make a list of everything that goes into debugging, I think that we could really make some legitimately good content. And I think that that's the biggest, honestly, that's one of the larger parts about this job, especially early on in your career, is just being able to go through and find a problem and step through it in the code, see what the result is, and fix it, and then test it again. But there's a lot that goes into that, and I just don't know if we're ever really taught that much, to be honest with you. Maybe some people are, but I think that that's been a big area that's been missed. Because I think that there's a point you can just learn breakpoints and you can learn basic things like that. And you can get by with just those things for many years. But there's a lot of powerful things within Visual Studio and other IDEs like Rider that offer you a way to kind of go beyond just the simple breakpoint. Visual Studio, for example, has what's called diagnostic sessions. Diagnostic sessions show you call stacks. They show you executed SQL if you're using Entity Framework. They show you what the memory usage is. They show you what's called hot paths in your code, where it shows you what methods are being called the most times. That stuff is all very important, but it's not really like running a diagnostic session in Visual Studio. I just don't know if I've ever seen it in any book that I've come across. And it's crazy to me because I think that that's a huge part of software engineering, is being able to do that and being able to truly identify what your system is doing and how to fix a problem that's going on, right? And I don't know if that's better to be done in a book. I don't know if we could do that in a video series. I don't know what we could do, but honestly, I really want to go extend the system design series out and kind of like add a kind of sub series in this, or like a module, whatever you want to call it, about practical debugging of systems. Because especially as systems go through and get more and more complex, we're going to have to figure out how to diagnose basic things that are happening, right? How do we fix, bugs? How do we prevent against errors from happening in the system? And how do we correctly handle those errors? And I don't know where like that falls under, if that falls under system design, if that falls under learning a framework, if that falls under, I don't know where that falls under, but it's got to fall under somewhere. And I think it's been a big gap. So if anyone has come across any books or resources that go into practical debugging of a system, let me know, because I would love to see one of these and see what they talk about and see if it's helpful. And I get that part of it too. Part of the reason why it might not be talked about is because finding and kind of sorting out bugs just is it's kind of generic problem solving at that point. It's kind of relies on a person's ability to think and problem solve, but I think it still relies on the just being comfortable, being able to do that in the context of a system of software. And again, this is why I think that system design is one of the most important things to learn in software engineering, right? Because it's not just syntax. Your IDEs are getting so powerful to the point where I just don't think syntax errors are going to be as prevalent as they once were, because of all these like co-pilots and AI assist tools that are telling you how to refactor your code, doing all these things. I just think that syntax errors are going to be less and less common. But I think the things that are still going to be pretty common are the system errors, the system design issues that we're having. What happens if your system or your service is pulling from or consuming a message off a queue, but then is doing that in such a way where it's then making a call to get a bunch of data, and then it's creating a bottleneck off of that consumer off the queue, and then your application it's not performing because of that bottleneck. We were seeing that happen on our two-stroke engine. That's why I brought it up. We were seeing that happen, and that's one of the reasons I introduced the Rust microservice into this, is because Rust is highly performant and it's able to basically in real time consume messages off RabbitMQ and then publish them back to another queue. It's so fast and it works. It's almost ridiculous how fast it is. If you've never worked with Rust and connected it to RabbitMQ, I'm telling you, you should try. It's mind-boggling how fast it is. But that was one of the reasons we introduced that into our two-stroke system, is because we were noticing heavy latency in when we were just using a single service and connecting to RabbitMQ. Because if you have, again, this is like 8 months ago we did this video series, but you can go back and watch it, and you can look at what happened and why I introduced the Rust microservice to begin with. But the ability to just problem solve and think through system design issues and system issues is huge, and it's hard to find resources about that. It's hard to find practical resources about how to debug services, how to debug applications, especially when there's a lot of them going on. And it's hard because, it goes back to something else we were talking about, but it requires a lot of local setup. But I think it's just absolutely necessary. And I don't know if we can make, I really think it's a gap. I really do. I think if we make something like that, or we extend this system design series out to cover practical debugging, I think that could be huge. I don't know. I've really been thinking about this because I've noticed a lot of patterns over all these books that I've read. But one thing that I just don't remember reading much about, if any, is just practical debugging. Because like once you get your system up, oh yeah, it's great, you can run this or whatever. And it might have like the occasional like issue that you might encounter, like the occasional error or the occasional object reference exception. But what happens if the error is not an object reference? What happens if it's not related to nulls at all? What happens if it's like, what happens if it's an authentication issue? Or what happens if it's something like, oh, we can't connect to our database or something? There's just a lot of things that go into that I wish that there was just kind of like a practice, like test system that you could give somebody that throws these errors, that then trains somebody on how to read the error and then correctly implement a solution to fix the error. I think that really could be huge. Honestly, making some kind of repository with these errors built in that somebody could pull down and reproduce these errors and then take the steps to fix them. Honestly, I think that would be a super like powerful training tool, because the errors are obviously going to be fixable, but you could provide like in the README the steps to go about fixing the errors, and then somebody could just go, let's say there's like five issues that you're going to encounter. You're going to encounter like database connection issue, authentication issue, an object reference issue. I don't know what else. Some kind of like, I'm trying to think of like maybe some kind of like race condition issue, or even some kind of like, I'm trying to think of like an obscure one. Like if you have in .NET, sometimes depending on how you structure your middleware, maybe you run into an issue with improper service registration. That could be a big one, because service registration is a huge topic. So just being able to diagnose dependency injection issues is basically what it reduces down to. That could be pretty cool. Honestly, I might make that for this channel, because I think that would be a super powerful tool. And if I make that repository and then I make a write-up of steps to fix all the issues that you might encounter, then you can just then you can just go back and look at how did I do and what were the things that I missed. I don't know. I think that would be a really, really powerful tool, and I think that would be fun to do on the channel. Yeah, let me know your thoughts on that, actually, because I think that, again, for me, that would have been helpful, because when I started software engineering, like I debugged applications like in school and personal projects, like, just setting breakpoints and then just like stepping through code and stuff like that. But it's always just a single application, right? Like, it's not really true of a system. And I think that's the context that we work in, right? We're not working in an isolated application. We're working in a system. So I don't know. Let me know your thoughts on that, because I think that could be pretty cool. Yeah, I feel like this is like turned into like a stand-up video. The stand-up video series that we did in this channel. So anyway, I'll see you in the next one.